Happy Pride and welcome to hashtag Own Your Pride, a conversation about the WNBA's evolution and pioneering leadership in supporting the LGBTQ plus community. Today, we'll discuss how the WNBA became a safe space for athletes to fully be themselves, how sports has played a role in shaping athletes' freedom and identity, and how visibility is changing the game. My name is Kristin Bernert, and I had the honor of leading the Liberty for several years before finally getting out of the way of Kia Clark so she could do my job much better than I ever could. I started with the Detroit Shock back in 2002, also was in LA with the Sparks in the WNBA League office, so I guess that would make me an OG. And speaking of OGs, we have the OG of OGs, Angela Taylor, who started with the WNBA in 1997, which Angela, that's what, the 25th anniversary. You were there at the beginning?
Yeah, I think I was 5 or 6 when I started there, right?
Yeah.
But who's counting?
Yes, and so you were there during the launch. You were there for 9 seasons, then went on to lead the Minnesota Lynx, over to the Washington Mystics, and then your final stop in the WNBA was the Atlanta Dream before moving back to your hometown of Boise, Idaho. Boise or Boise? Boise. That's they call it in Boise. Yeah. They call it Boise.
Yep. Good.
Where she founded the Dignitas agency, which is committed to engaging in real talk with their clients, allowing them to have candid and radical conversations with leaders who are interested in driving transformational change that creates more equitable organizations. Speaking of transformational change, I spent a few days in Boise last summer and visited with AT while I was there. And I just got to tell you, she took me to this ice cream place where they pair ice cream with different beers and wine. AT, it's like one of the best places on earth, right? What's the name of the place?
The Still, and it's called, right, The Still for a reason.
So good. Yeah. So anyway, you didn't think you'd come to this getting some recommendations on ice cream, but you did. Next up, we have Jasmine Jones, a native of Tallahassee, Florida. She played at the University of Louisville, where she was all ACC first team. And then she was drafted in the first round by your New York Liberty. She was first team, all rookie team from the Wubble. And so far this season has been electrifying the crowd at Barclays Center. Jasmine, I believe that I saw you in a dance-off on the Jumbotron at Barclays. Is that a true story?
That is very true. And as of right now, I am undefeated until next season for the Brooklyn Nets. So
until next season, I'm
looking to defend my crown.
I love it. I love the challenge. We won't make you do that today, I don't think. If you get stumped on a question, just start, feel free to start dancing. It'll just distract everybody. And then finally, we have the Ventura, California native, Sami Whitcomb. Welcome, Sami. Sami played at the University of Washington, where she was all Pac-12, but then went undrafted in the WNBA. Anybody who just, doesn't make it isn't drafted in the WNBA, just think of Sami. She went overseas to pursue her dreams. Ended up in Australia for, I think, 7 years. Where Sami, is that where you met your wife?
Yep, I was there for 5 years playing, and I met Kate there. Yeah,
5 years. Okay, so my math was wrong, but so it wasn't all that bad. You went to Australia. That's not that bad.
No,
you meet your
definitely
wife.
Worse
that's
places
not that bad, right? So you've lived quite a charmed life. Then you actually, Seattle called you and said, "Hey, why don't you come back and play for the Storm?" Won a couple of championships there, and then you decided to take your talents to Atlantic Avenue, right?
Yep.
That's kind of how it went. And Sami's having an awesome season in her first year with the Liberty. But Sami, it's probably a big change for you. How are you, Kate, and little Nash adjusting to New York City?
Yeah, Nash is probably adjusting better than all of us, honestly. He loves it. He loves the bright lights. He doesn't sleep, so it's perfect for him. No, it's been really good. The team's been incredible. The organization's been amazing and really helpful and supportive of us. And most importantly, we're just really happy to be here together. That's kind of the biggest thing. So yeah, we're loving it.
Great. Well, glad to hear you enjoying it. So we're just going to get right into it. I have some questions for everybody, and then we're going to get to some fan questions that were submitted. So we'll just start with, the WNBA has been known to lead in sports around LGBTQ plus issues. And we had big news this week in the sports industry when Carl Nassib became the first active NFL player to come out. What were your first thoughts when you heard the news? And I'll start with Sami.
Yeah, I thought it was really incredible. I think anytime, someone with that kind of a platform comes out like that and is so proud about it. I really enjoyed the way he did it as well. I thought it was great that, he kind of, he downplayed it a little, like, hey, just wanted to let you guys know, been meaning to do this. But I mean, you talk about that visibility, and I think that's why it's so special and amazing that someone with his kind of visibility is so willing to do that and to show all these other kids out there and people that would look up to him, kids, people his age, older people, anyone, that this is a wonderful thing to celebrate. Be true to who you are. Don't shy away from it. I think more of that is obviously what this world needs. And I just think, I think it's a real credit to him that he's done this. He's done this at this stage of his career as well. We spoke about, he's not, he's currently in the NFL. Like that's incredible. That's really special.
For sure. Jasmine, anything to add?
No, just to piggyback off what Sami said, just him with the player he is. He's an NFL player. He's active right now playing in the NFL. And just for him to be true to himself and be open about it is just awesome. And him like now leading the way in a sense. So if it is more people out there like that who's, maybe hesitant about coming out or anything like that, maybe he just uplifted somebody to have that kind of courage that he had that day, which is awesome. And like Sami said, people that look up to him now, who would be more open to showing them how to be true to yourself and things like that. So I think that was really awesome of him. And like Sami said, he tried to downplay it, but it was like really, really great. It was a great announcement. Like when I first heard it, I would start smiling at the video. So it was just awesome.
Very true. And Angela, you're kind of in this business. Were you talking about it with your staff? Did you hear anything from your clients? Is it resonating?
Yeah, Kibby, what resonated with me, a couple things, much of what Sami and Jazz shared. But there was a moment early on during his statement where he had this kind of childlike smile, right? And what resonated with me in that moment, it took me back to an instance where we were doing some work with a client, and an employee, student, et cetera, was showing up in a space with leaders and was talking about what their experience was like as they navigated the workplace. And they said that every day they entered that room, they felt like they were entering a hostile environment, right? Wow. And you can feel the pause in the room, right? And as mouths dropped from leaders who were like, that's not what we want to create. But no one had really verbalized what an experience is like for somebody, right? Where we don't create inclusive spaces, where we don't make people feel like they belong or they can be themselves, as Sami and Jazz mentioned. And so when I watched his statement, the fact that he was so casual and nonchalant about it, but that he also, you felt this sense of relief and enjoyment and happiness. And I think that's what the work that we try to do with clients is about. Is this is really important. Representation matters, but you want everyone to be able to live freely and fully, to bring their full selves to work and not just survive situations or climates, but to be able to thrive in those moments. And I think what Carl did is going to allow many others to be able to thrive and to step into their power. And the second thing that I think that really resonated with me is very similar to the support that the WNBA has been receiving over the last couple of years from NBA players and celebrities, was on social media, right? Just the response, how people were happy for him.
Yeah.
I think that climate has changed over the last few years. So really proud of him, and I'm excited to see what's next as someone with such a huge platform has taken such a big step.
I loved his thoughtfulness too. Just, when he had the platform, he also made it a point to make a donation to the Trevor Project, which I thought was, just brilliant to do, and just shows just how thoughtful he is as a person, and how important he knew that moment was going to be. As casual as he made it, I think he knew what he was doing, which is really smart and brave. And I'll tell you, when I stopped for a minute and thought about, wow, this is 2021, and I thought, for me, I thought back to Sue Wicks. Sue Wicks, talk about an OG. In 2002, she was the first active WNBA player to come out. So it's almost 20 years ago that Sue did that. And so, what can you say about, especially Sami and Jazz, about what Sue did back then? Jasmine, you were probably 5 years old, right? 2002.
Yeah, I think so. I was born in '96, so yeah.
Yeah, so I did math okay that time, but what did Sue do? What do you think of what she did, that bravery back then, and what has it meant to players today?
I mean, I think for her to do it way back then in 2002, knowing that just today in today's society, how more openly people are to accepting people of the LGBTQ community, how back then it wasn't this way. Just her bravery, just to do that type of thing and be a leader, a pioneer in that aspect. And then for years to come, more people to open up about who they are and be true to themselves. So I think it was a great starting point for the WNBA with Sue. And then now you see, us all joining together as one big happy family. So
yeah, I think as well. Yeah, I completely agree. And I think when you look at what the league stands for and how, the W is just my favorite part about the W, I think, is how we don't shy away from, what matters, the topics that matter, the issues that matter. We are all about supporting those and being a voice for those communities. And I think it starts with a Sue Wicks, it starts with someone being willing to be that first person to be vulnerable and to have the courage to come out and say, this is who I am and I'm proud of it. And hopefully that opened a door to so many others. And I have to believe that, her doing that was, the first kind of stepping stone to us being the league that we are now, to us being this, this league of women that are so strong and so brave at the forefront of so many of these issues. And yeah, you see the number of women in this league that are a part of that community, and prideful of it. And I think it's pretty special that you can kind of, go all the way back to one player, one moment, their courage, their bravery, and how that sort of, led to this incredible space that this league sort of exists in now.
So true. And AT, you were at the league office. You're up the street, up Fifth Avenue, in your ivory tower. I mean Olympic Tower. And so you were there when this happened, and so you saw kind of what was happening in that moment, and then from then on, and where we are today, and the chair you sit on, sit in now. What are those core changes that you've seen from that time, looking back and thinking about that moment, to what you see now?
Yeah, great question. One of the things that we always kind of hung our hat on, if you will, as the WNBA, was that you had these incredibly exceptional and brilliant women who weren't just basketball players, where it wasn't just about their scoring averages or the number of rebounds they had, or how sweet their jump shot was, whatever what you perceive professional athletes to be. And what the WNBA started to create back then was that we start to look at athletes differently, that they're not just one-dimensional. And I think that in those moments, what Sue was able to do in 2002, and what the WNBA stood for then and continues to stand for, is these individuals that are multifaceted. They were, we had people that were going to law school, folks that were going to medical school, practicing law and playing at the same time. We had mothers. We had all of these individuals that were bringing their full selves to the workplace and showing women and men and little boys and little girls, right, that you can like do what you love and what you're passionate about, and you can do it exceptionally well. And I think that thread has been pulled through by the WNBA in a much more powerful way. One of the things that we see inside the work that we do in this space right now is that oftentimes it's those on the front lines that are further ahead. There's more urgency with employees, with consumers, with students, with players than there are maybe in leadership positions.
Yep.
And so the players have always been out ahead in this space. What Sue did, what Brittany did, a few years later, the activism that we've seen from the players over the last few years, right? They're the ones that see the urgency, are meeting the moment and shifting that moment to create movements. And the fact that the WNBA has consistently showed up that way in a myriad of facets makes me proud to have been part of it, and makes me excited about what's next. Right, because our players are using their voices and their platforms in really powerful ways to influence and impact generations to come.
So true. I love that line, using a moment to create a movement. And that is, truly what the WNBA has done, particularly over the last year, but even before then, well ahead of its time. My next question is more like, so there's been so many different people. You mentioned Brittany. And of course, Sue, and there's been many others in the WNBA. But for you personally, and I'll start with Sami, and it could be an ally, it could be somebody that you don't know but you've just admired. But who's inspired you the most in your own journey to find and express your own identity?
I probably have a handful of some of my best friends from college, honestly, that, they were teammates. They were people that are still very much a part of my life. And I think seeing their journey, and I think, they sort of had their, we all sort of navigate this differently at different times in our lives and in different ways, in terms of, just our own identity and pride and all of that. And I was a little bit later to the kind of with that in my life. And I had friends that were, I got to see their journey with it and witness theirs, and the amount of confidence that they had with it, pride that they had with it, courage that they showed throughout their journey, I think was really inspiring for me. Mm-hmm. And it was literally like, there was probably 3 years where I just had multiple friends really just coming to, realize who they were, what they wanted in life, who they wanted to be, and that they didn't want to be someone that wasn't true to themselves anymore. And they really owned it. And I think it was really inspiring for me to see how much they thrived after, how happy they were, the joy that they really found in all aspects of their life. And it felt like, they had this block before that. And then, once they were really themselves and just owned who they were and were authentic and, shared that with the people closest in their lives instead of hiding it, it was really beautiful to kind of see that evolution for them in their lives. And I think it just made me want to have those conversations with myself. It made me really want to just figure out who I was and what I wanted. And then, I think meeting Kate and then that sort of changing my whole life and really accepting that, like, this is what makes me happy. This is what I want. And that might be different than what, I imagined, what others imagined for me. But I think I was really blessed that before I kind of reached that stage in my life, I had these really fantastic examples of just what it means to love yourself and how that changes your life, really.
You've had an amazing experience, and it seems like that foundation of support has driven everything for you. You're a lucky person. AT, a little bit about your journey and kind of who's inspired you to be authentic in your own identity.
Yeah, you mentioned before in your intro of me that I grew up in Boise, Idaho. Right, or Mountain Home, Idaho, a tiny little Air Force community right outside of Boise, Idaho. And so oftentimes I found myself as the only person of color in every space, right? And that was the instance in many different situations, like from going to undergrad to grad school, to navigating the sports and entertainment space, where oftentimes as I worked my way up the ladder, if you will, I was the only woman, and certainly the only person of color that was sitting at those tables with executives and leaders. And I had so many people, a plethora of individuals that showed me what it was like and how important it was to be an ally, right? So I needed allies to help me navigate those spaces, to help me be brave and courageous to show up as a powerful Black woman in a male-dominated industry. And that's how I learned to be an ally to the LGBTQ community as well, is you learn from those that you're around. There's so many things that people offer, but sometimes there's some introspection required of what you needed along the way. And I was able to extract those things that I needed, again, as a person of color navigating this space, to be an ally for the LGBTQ community as well.
You know, Angela, when I was in Boise, it was funny. I was walking for coffee and I was wearing like, I think a Nike, like Be True or some shirt. And somebody like started honking their horn. Like, yeah, like coming. I'm like, wow, like Boise, they really don't see many people like me.
Boise, there's an evolution, right? But we're not quite where we all want to be fully inclusive. But yeah, like you're starting to see, like there's pockets of people understanding, right? Like let's support, like so that everyone can live freely and fully. Like, that's all any individual is asking for.
Jazz, how about you? How about somebody in your life?
I would have to say mine were a couple of people. I would start off with my sister, my older sister. Just her, how she's very true to herself. She loves who she is and how she just goes about her life. She's very free-spirited, and just does what makes her happy. And I would say when I got to college, former WNBA player, actually, Adrian Johnson, AJ, she worked at Louisville. She's still there. So me and AJ had a lot in common, and she was always there for me. And knowing that I was young my freshman year, and knowing like in college, that's when you truly, quote unquote, find yourself. Mm-hmm. You get an experience to a whole bunch of different things. So just having her in my corner, and you know, quote unquote, teaching me the ropes and things like that, and just going to her anytime I needed anything. If I wasn't comfortable with doing something, if I was comfortable with doing something, just having her in my corner. So she was definitely somebody who I looked up to and always needed or anything like that. So those two especially, and then being in college was definitely like where I would say I found my true self and was very open to who I am. Very unapologetically me, and that's where I think I grew the most when I was in college. And then now coming into the WNBA, you know, it's more open and everything like that, more accepting and everything like that. So I just feel like I'm at a home, to say the least. Yeah. You know what I'm saying? Like I'm home and I'm accepted in this league. This league is growing tremendously every single day, and I don't have to look over my shoulder. And I know every day I probably go out in the streets or somewhere, probably somebody's being judging me and things like that. But I don't have to worry about that in the WNBA because we're one big happy family, like I said earlier. And I just feel comfortable being here and being myself. And I'm gonna always be myself no matter what. And that's the one thing that I definitely learned while I was in college, is just being true to yourself, being yourself no matter what other people think about you.
It's a great motto to live by. And it sounds like, you know, when people develop their opinions or their thoughts on LGBTQ plus issues, so much of it is rooted in their own experience, whether it's with family or where they're from. Their religion, all of it, you know, usually plays into how they think and how they feel, which usually is very much evolving. But all of you've lived around the country. You know, Sami, you've lived internationally. Can you just talk about some of the differences that you've seen in different places that you've lived, and even share some experiences if there's memorable ones for the audience.
Yeah. Certainly the different cultures, the different religions, that plays, a very real role in people's perceptions of LGBTQ plus communities and their acceptance of those. Even I think just their knowledge, their understanding. I've played in a few countries that and had teammates that were gay, but they couldn't be, like, they weren't allowed to be. They had to hide that from their families, from their parents. They had to hide who they loved. Or if they weren't hiding who they loved, it was something that they had to accept. It was never going to be acknowledged in a real way. Like, they weren't going to be able to get married in their home countries. They were going to have to go elsewhere if they wanted that to be something that was, acknowledged by a marriage certificate. I actually had a very real just experience with that myself when Kate and I wanted to get married. It was really confronting when we couldn't get married in Australia. When we wanted to, it wasn't something you could do then at that time. It was 2017. It was 2017 and we couldn't get married in Australia. Wow. It was incredibly confronting because it felt like this country that was so open and accepting and
that's shocking.
So forward thinking, and we couldn't get married. So that was probably our first, my first real, oh my gosh, this is still so far from where it needs to be. We still have so many things we need to work out if this is, kind of what people are still facing. And it really makes you feel for the years and years and generations of people who face that in so many other ways every single day. So, that was just one small thing, but yeah, I've definitely been in communities and in countries where, Kate and I don't feel as comfortable or safe or, to hold hands and to walk around and be affectionate with each other. Because it's just not something that is culturally accepted. And that's hard still, obviously, because, you don't want to feel unsafe being yourself and being authentic. And that is something that people face in a really, really threatening way all over the world still, which is really, really sad. And it's something that I think, not everybody maybe knows because, we see in certain places and in certain countries, and hopefully, we see in America how far we've come and the pride that, people celebrate and stuff, but it is very, very much not where it needs to be still. And we have to keep pushing for that.
Yeah. I'm sure even with your son now, not feeling safe is, it's one thing with the two of you and now having a son. I'm sure that's a whole nother level.
Yeah, absolutely.
Jazz, what about you? Your experiences growing up in Tallahassee and Louisville and on the big city? What are some of the differences you see?
I mean, when I go back home, I don't like, my experience is different from Sami. When I go back home, I feel fine when I go back home. In Louisville, when I was in college, I felt fine. But like here in New York, I'm not gonna say that I feel like hesitant to do anything or show who I am in a certain extent, but it's just different being in the South than being in the North because of, in the South you have all the Southern hospitality, and here in New York is kind of different. But I mean, I know it's hard, especially going to different countries and playing overseas like a lot of WNBA players do. So them being with their significant others, it's probably harder in different countries. I can't even imagine it. What Sami and Kate would have go through, things like that. So it definitely sucks, but like we said, we have so much more work to do for people to feel safe, just being themselves in different parts of the world. So
for sure. Anything to add, AT?
Yeah, I think that, there's so much nuance to this conversation, right? Like to a certain extent, there's some simplicity to, some of the requests that we're saying of how easy it is just to make that shift as individuals to be more welcoming and inclusive. And then there's the complexity of, we're tribal by nature. Right. And so there's the tribes that we all belong to, our families, right, or one space that you have to navigate, and families are interacting differently around, different. Then there's communities, there's states, there's regionality, there's the U.S. versus the global perspective. And I think that, when I think about this work in general, diversity, equity, inclusion, from a US-based and US-centric lens. I think it's really important for us all as individuals and collectively to understand that, right, there are very different perspectives in different markets. There's different laws, like, right?
Yes.
Like you can't talk about race in France. Like it's illegal, like to talk about race. And so I think the complexity for this conversation happens based on all of those different layers that we're navigating. And to Sami's point, about the global landscape is oftentimes how we're navigating different cultures and increasing our cultural awareness is we have this US centric focus and it's just like doing our homework and actually understanding what the landscape is in other markets to understand how this whole puzzle fits together.
Very, very complex. And, you know, it is, America still isn't perfect even compared to other countries in terms of our you know, behaviors around LGBTQ plus. And, you know, I think back, you know, when I first started in the WNBA and how, you know, the league, you know, you talk about the country and I've said all along that, you know, the WNBA's progress is going to, everybody talk about the WNBA marketing and I always said like the WNBA's biggest marketing issue is society. And once society catches up to the WNBA and the players, the incredible players that we have in this league, and who they are, or it's gonna take off. And you're seeing that happen. But it was not without some bumps along the way. And the issues are and have been complex. And you know, it's taken a lot of I want to say courage at times, and sometimes, you know, maybe the league or teams stubbed their toes a bit with how they handled things, all with the goal of growing the league and taking care of our fans and taking care of our players. But this is still very much a country divided in so many ways. And so, you know, when you're in the space and especially back, and I think about, you know, the 2002, 2003, 2004, 2005, along that time, when Sue came out, you know, the country was not the way it is today. You think about, you know, I think it was in 1997 when Ellen had her, you know, her coming out show, the puppy episode, and her show was canceled in 1998, right? And so, you know, we were, you know, Sue Wicks comes out in 2002. So there was this evolution that's happened over time in the WNBA kind of being the one to just go step by step and progressing it. And now you're finally seeing society catch up, which is an amazing thing to see happen. But all of it in so many ways has been led by the players and the tremendous sisterhood in the WNBA, and you really shine through when watching the ESPN's documentary 144. Can you guys, like Sami and Jazz, you guys are the ones closest to it. Can you talk about what your experience in the WNBA has been? You guys have alluded to it a little bit more, but even take us a little bit deeper into some of the conversations that were happening in the wobble that we might not have seen as part of the 144 that have really impacted you and how you felt about being a part of this league and about being, you know, authentic and true to yourself.
I would say just the whole bubble experience last year was very life-changing, to say the sense. Of course, it was my first year, so I wasn't expecting to be in a bubble, of course, but just being there was different in the sense that we all came together for that season, for the Say Her Name campaign, to wear Breonna Taylor's name on the back of our jersey. So just to know that as a league, as a whole, we all came together to do something great, something bigger than ourselves, something bigger than the game of basketball, to bring awareness to it. So just being a part of that was life-changing, was very special and humbling to me. So like every day, like I just wake up and just blessed that I'm part of of growing well-spoken, outgoing lead like this, because these women that we play against every day are so great on and off the court. And off the court, probably even better, because we're always going to fight for what we believe in, stand up for what's right and what's wrong, and always speak our mind no matter what.
Sami?
Yeah, I mean, I definitely agree with everything Jazz said. It was eye-opening. It was life-changing, just in that the conversations that we had, the issues that we were dealing with, the very real kind of topics of, in terms of what we wanted to say, what we wanted our season to be about. And we were very intentional in all of the, there were so many conversations. Some things, might have seemed really small, whether it was about national anthem things, or, where did we want Breonna Taylor's name to be on the, all of those things. We wanted it to be so purposeful and for it to have such a greater meaning than the basketball. And I think it was special to, get a chance to really get to know these women off the court and see what they cared about and what mattered to them and how much it touched their lives and how real, we're human first, and I think getting to share some of these things with them. And I remember the game that it was DC, and I can't remember who else it was, when they were deciding to not play and to make that statement, and Ariel Atkins spoke, and the things that she said and how moved she was and how moved I was hearing what she had to say and how everyone came together in that moment. I think another moment that really stuck out for me was when we got to speak on a Zoom call with the Michelle Obama. And we got to really pick her brain about some of the things that mattered, voting and how to get people to vote and how to get people to really use their voice. And, you get to hear some of the questions that the other players are asking, that they're thinking of, and you're just, I think it was just incredible to really, to get to that insight into everybody, and to see that, and to just see how thoughtful this group is. And it was really special. And it's something that I think will really have a long lasting impact on me, for sure.
I bet. And so awesome that it was able to be shared in some way with the documentary. We saw it come to life as it was happening, but to kind of see that behind the scenes was really awesome. So thank you to Shanae for really driving that. When I think about how far we've come, I also think about how far we have to go. You see it every day in the conversation around non-binary and trans athletes, and so it's still happening. We're still not there. Let's get a crystal ball and look 20 years out, 20, 25 years out, when who knows, maybe little Nash is playing the WNBA. You don't know, right? And so what do you think the world's going to look like at that point, and what role will have the WNBA played in it? A2, we'll start with you.
Wow, that's a big question. I'm trying to think what I'm having for dinner tonight. So you want me to think 25 years down the road?
Pizza's always a good choice, just FYI.
I know, right? Or some ice cream. Now you have me thinking about the sweetest things in life. I think, there's a couple things to set some context, right? Of what we've seen literally over the last 12, 13, 14 months, just around the social justice movement, of how quickly things have moved in a short amount of time. Vernacular changes so quickly. And what we also are witnessing is we just listened to what Jazz and Sami are bringing to this conversation. That generation and the younger generation, they have so much more fluidity and nuance in these conversations. This is nothing to them. This is an everyday conversation practice. There's so much energy around it. And so I'm hopeful, right, that what we have, the future leaders, the emerging leaders, those voices that have normalized this conversation, because they're recognizing that, right, we all are endeavoring to be ourselves, right? And that should be the priority. I'm hopeful in that over 25 years, just with the urgency that generation has, with the proximity that they have to influence, with the desire that they have to actually have an impact, hopeful for there's going to be so many things that are completely different than what's happened over the last 25 years here in the WNBA, but really the last 5-10 years in the WNBA. But what I know for sure is that WNBA players will continue to be the leaders of the pack for a myriad of different reasons. And something that always resonates with me whenever I'm speaking to different groups, the thing that the W was about and has been about and will continue to be about is that if you empower women, you empower communities, right? And so we have empowered women, given them a platform where they can leverage that platform to have voice, to have influence, to have impact. And it continues to happen on a regular basis. What will change, I think, KB, over the course of the next 25 years is, I think the last 10 years we've been focused on, when you think about diversity, equity, inclusion, we've been focused on the D, the diversity, and maybe a little bit of the I, the inclusion. So that's representation. But what really needs to happen, the thing that I am focused on is the E, the equity. And that's the policies, the procedures, the practices, the programs, right? That gets to the root cause of where we are as a society. And if we can start to focus on the equity piece, gosh, where we'll be in 25 years will be remarkable.
Couldn't agree more. Sami?
Yeah, I think that's kind of where I was thinking as well. I think we talk about the kind of the climate change from, the beginning of the WNBA to now, and how the steps that have changed and how it's different. Like Jazz and I, we feel so much more comfortable to be ourselves in this league, and how different that is probably to, year one and stuff. And I think as we move forward, hopefully that continues to be, normalized as well, that continues to grow. But I think, perhaps where the larger growth, hopefully we're moving towards, is in the actual policies, is in the actual, like, what are we doing that's tangible? What are we doing that is actionable? And, we use that word a lot in the Wubble last year, like, what can we do that's actionable now? And so I think hopefully there's more of that. Hopefully in 25 years, we can sit here, we could, come back and sit down and say, it's these things. We can write down, we can actually say specifically, it's this, this, and that, and that's led to this, this, and that, and that's opened these doors, and that's created this policy, and that's created, these things, and that's led to so-and-so. So I hope that it's more tangible, policies or whatever it is, that we can look to and point to and say, that's what we did. We did that by saying these things, by doing these things, by rallying, by, making our voices heard. So hopefully, and that starts with the voting, that starts with all those things. And hopefully there's just more of that, and people really find power in their voices and want to be heard and express themselves in that ways.
Well, you turned the Senate, so that's a good start in terms of driving policy. So now we're going to go to fan questions. Want to make sure we leave enough time for fan questions. And so the first one is from Deborah Hamilton. She said, I work in a middle school and I've seen a lot of young people dealing with identity issues. What advice would you give to a young person going through this situation? I'm going to kick it to Jazz. You want to dance?
No, I do not want to dance. Repeat the question one more time for me.
So the question is basically, there's a middle schooler that's having identity issues and is struggling with that. What advice would you give to that middle schooler?
I would definitely say find someone who is very close to you, who you can talk to, who you could go to, and be comfortable with, and speaking about your problems and having them help you through those issues. I know when I was in like middle school, high school, I've always had a great support system behind me, like in my family and things like that. But I also had that one close friend I knew I could depend on when I couldn't go to my family, or I couldn't go to a certain, like, my teachers or anything like that, So I always had that one close friend that was always there for me to go to, just be a sponge if I needed to vent or anything of that nature. So I would definitely just say, have that one close friend that you can depend on, that will always be there for you through no matter what you're going to. And, just find a great role model who you can possibly look up to. And I wouldn't say model your life after them, but just take some things from their lives that they did and things like that.
Great advice. Sami?
Yeah, I think Jazz really kind of hit the nail on the head. I think there's a lot to be said about being able to share and confide with someone and what you're feeling and what you're going through, even if you don't have answers, even if they can't give you answers. I think sharing in that with someone, the relief you get from that sense of belonging to someone, whether it's, it might not be a group of people, but it's a person that you feel like you can trust and you can understand and can share the burden with you, whatever it is that you're going through, until you get to a place of knowing and understanding, because that can take a long time. And there's no rush. I would say there's no rush. There's no pressure to know who you are at a young age. It's very normal. It's very normal to be confused, to have questions, but I think don't be afraid to, none of us can do this on our own. So don't be afraid to lean on someone. We need people in our lives. And so I hope that they have someone that they can rely on. If it's not a friend or a family member, I had a coach when I was young, a teacher when I was young, that, there are people that care. There are people that want to help. So just, I would say, seek that person out, like Jazz said, and really use them, because we all need people.
We certainly do. And we definitely need allies. And so this question comes from Glenn Starkey, who describes himself as a straight, happily married guy who met his future wife at a Liberty game. AT, what would you say is the best way for an ally like Glenn to keep moving forward, to help, move the LGBT community forward without taking away from the community, right? Mm-hmm. So how does an ally do that?
Yeah, it's a great question, Glenn. I think that, the first thing is awareness, right? Of understanding what the needs of that community are. I think so often as allies or accomplices, right, we presuppose what is needed and necessary without actually having kind of taking the temperature of that community. And so it is surrounding yourself with members of the community and getting curious and asking questions and learning and exploring and discovering. And so that you are actually focusing your energy in the right place, not in a place that you think is right, but a place that actually is additive to what the community needs. And I think the other thing that shows up for allies is, sometimes members of the community don't have the wherewithal or shouldn't have to be the ones that are speaking up all the time. So as an ally or an accomplice, like, what are those spaces that you can enter and where you can leverage as a white male in particular, right, who has a lot of probably positional power, proximity to influence? How can you leverage your platform to speak on the behalf of somebody else? But it takes that first step. First, right, is understanding what is necessary, what the community needs or wants, and so that you're speaking in alignment with their voice. And then it's continue to go on the journey. I think as an ally, like, you're continuing to grow and learn about yourself as well throughout the process. And if you do those things, I think that, again, the world will be a better place. Because in order for us to get to that place that we all alluded to 25 years from now, it can't just be members of the community, any community, right? Whether it's around social justice, whether it's around racial equity, whether it's around the LGBTQ community, we need allies to step up and participate in this journey, in this process as well.
Completely. And Sami, do you have anything to add to that?
No, I think she said that perfectly. I wouldn't want to try to. That was great.
You can tell she's a pro, right? Like, this is AT's job. So she's pretty darn good at it. And the next question comes from Asabi Davis. Why do you think it took so long for the WNBA to recognize the LGBTQ plus fans as part of their fan base? We are the ones who have supported the WNBA since the beginning. I'll have something to say here, but would love to get Jazz's opinion on what she thinks happened. No? You got nothing for me? All right. AT, you got anything?
Yeah, I'll jump in. I don't know specifically, but what oftentimes shows up in these spaces is when leaders are, and again, the climate 25 years ago is completely different than the climate now, but when leaders are trying to lead in this space, oftentimes they look at the downside risks versus the upside opportunities,
Yep.
right? And I think that, again, like no one was navigating this space particularly well 25 years ago. No one knew what that meant. But what I do know as an executive, and KB probably can speak to this as well, at the WNBA, we wanted to build and grow this league. And what was different, what was changing in those moments in the late 90s, early 2000s was sports in general was going from just sport where you roll the ball out and you hope people will purchase tickets and show up for a game, to being big business where you're competing against other enterprises like, other entertainment, theme parks, movies, and those sorts of things. So we had to become much more sophisticated at building a business brand. And I think inside of that, right, it's ticket sales, it's sponsorship, and it's TV revenue in essence. And the formula for those different things wasn't as clear as it is now, right? I think that leaders inside of all industries and ecosystems are much more responsive to consumers because we're getting feedback quickly. All right,
Yes.
Like I think on Twitter, like if someone's flight was delayed or their baggage didn't get there, American Airlines is hearing about it right away, and you can be responsive. And so I think that the WNBA, as well as other brands and businesses, in the last couple of years have become much better at being responsive. But I'll caution everybody, in some regards, it's been performative. And that leads to not what we want to have happen at all. What I think the WNBA has done when we got there as a league was not to be performative, right? Early on, it was about programs and, having theme nights and those sorts of things. But now you're starting to see some of the things that Sami and Jazz mentioned in the CBA and that negotiation. We're seeing some policy changes. And now we're in a space where we can actually understand from the business proposition how to leverage and be more inclusive of different voices. And again, I just think that from a society, we're just much more capable of doing that well now than anybody was before.
I think you're spot on, and your line around downside risk versus upside opportunity. It was. Man, I think every single year until the last couple of years, I don't even know when it stopped, that every article that was written about the WNBA was, is this the year it's going to die? Right? And so is this the year that it's going to go away? And, being in it, it was, you wanted to do the right things by the business at all times to make sure that these incredible players had a place to play in the United States. And that is where, I said it earlier, was how things handled perfect along the way and according to what our fans wanted from us. The answer is no, they absolutely weren't. But there was also the considerations that executives were dealing with along the way of making sure that the league continued moving on. That was always our North Star. And I think about I was reading about back this morning about the Ellen show, and advertisers just flat out went away. Chrysler, McDonald's, there was the advertisers bye. This is 1998, okay, and so. Now you look at the opposite happening with advertisers where I don't know if you guys get the bombardment of emails around everybody celebrating Pride. I mean, what a different world we're living in, and it was not that long ago, and it's awesome to see. But the fear of demise in the WNBA was real, and it was every year. And so that I think that downside risk, I think AT, you hit it on the head, hit the nail on the head.
Yeah, and just to add to that, we see, if you look at the NBA, right, some choices that are now, in focus around the season, the condensed season, the short layoff from the end of last year to now, there's there's some huge factors in relationships and partnerships that play into decisions that you make in order to, again, to be able to build a sustainable league. And I think that we all have learned individually and collectively, learned and grown and are in a very different place and space now. I think just in general, like when leaders are making decisions, an analogy I like to use is like the bystander rule. Is like there's 10% of the people that are bystanders that are going to be heroes. They're actually going to show up. Something's happening. They're going to jump in to stop a fight or whatever. There's 10% that are villains. So we saw it, during the, February, March, right, where somebody's just standing and watching somebody get kicked and beaten on the sidewalk, and as opposed to them stepping in to help, they close the door, right? And then there's 80% in the middle that are looking to their left and the right to see what to do. And I think oftentimes organizations, what they look to do is you want to kind of keep those voices, those naysayers quiet, right? And so you focus on your messaging on them. Maybe you think the 10% is already good, so you're safe. And then the space in the middle is like, right, where you invest a lot of your time is like, how can we convince this group to get on board with us as well, get them in the pulpit. And I think that the WNBA has learned and grown over the years is that group is a much bigger, much more powerful base for us to lean on for their support and to listen to as we continue to evolve.
Very, very true. One last question for Jazz. Jazz, Shanita Brinson had a question. How long did it take you before you were comfortable to discuss your pride?
I would say it didn't take long. I think it started when I was in college. I was very open to who I was and who I am now. In the way that I dressed or anything like that, I didn't shy away from anything. So I just knew, like, I was always comfortable with who I am, especially when I was younger. Like I knew for a fact that I wasn't the really girly person. Like I was very much a tomboy. I was a rough kid growing up. So I wasn't shying away from the fact that I was like that. So I was always comfortable. And it probably started when I got really, really comfortable when I was in college. And now I'm very open and very true to myself and going to be my unapologetically self. So that's just me.
We love you that way, Jazz. We absolutely love you that way. So please don't change.
Thank you.
So I think that's going to wrap our hashtag Own Your Pride panel. I really want to thank the panelists today. Angela, Sami, Jazz, you're all amazing. Really proud to be on this panel with you. The WNBA has come such a long way. Couldn't be prouder to be proud of this proud league, which is one heck of a journey in 25 years. And we owe so much of that to the incredible players that represent this league on the court every day. So thank you so much.